Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. James Sinclair, CEO and Principal of Signature Hospitality Group, joins me on the program today. SHG is the company behind the Sporting Globe Bar and Grill, TGI Fridays and Varsity. Over a decade ago, James saw an opportunity to double down on the American sports bar concept in Australia and has grown the business from a single venue in Geelong to a network of over 50 venues and 2,000 staff. We explore the philosophy required to do that, discuss how the group fosters creativity, and consider how technology will affect the future of hospitality and sports entertainment. Hello and welcome to the show, James.
Good to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to sit down with you in the office. The first question that I like to ask on the program is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know what you've brought to the program today.
I was going to share with you a period of crazy, and for your listeners, and for sure we'll talk about it, but I didn't have a hospitality background and had worked corporate. I was corporate finance originally and was quite young living abroad. I did a year in London and then over 3 years over in the US. And then when I got started, I fell in love with American sports bar while I was in the US and decided I wanted to have a crack, bring that home, which my parents thought was crazy and plenty of people I talked to at the time. And I ended up finding this pub in Geelong, which ended up becoming the first Sporting Globe. I was back in 2009, and I think if you thought about a sports bar back then, certainly when we surveyed people, people weren't as excited about the idea as I was, because I'd seen how amazingly vibrant and female-friendly, great experience the sports bars were in the US. A sports bar in Australia, when I talked to people back in 2009, was really the corner of a pub. Part of a pub with blokes in overalls swearing at the dogs, and certainly females, not one that I surveyed, said they were excited about attending. So I knew that was a challenge to overcome, and that was always a thought about in the design of our business model and plan. But the first pub is mentioned. So I rock up in Geelong. There was a sister pub to the pub that became the first Sporting Globe, and it was in Frankston. And I went to Frankston, tried to find it, was unsuccessful. It had just sold to somebody else. We just missed it. So I kept driving and went down to Sereno, caught the ferry across to Geelong and thought, let's just have a wander around there. We'll find this sister pub and see what it's like. Maybe it's an opportunity. It happened to be Mad Monday Day in Geelong. Geelong's a big football town. The boys are all out and about. Every pub in Geelong has got shenanigans happening. And I get to this pub right in the heart of Geelong City. It's all locked. And the pub looks immaculate inside. I'm knocking on the door. Eventually, this gentleman comes, opens the door, and he says, what do you want? And I said, can I come in for a beer? And he said, are you part of a Mad Monday football club? And I said, no, I'm just here for a beer. And he said, oh, all right. And he let me come in, have a beer, locked the door behind me again. No one in the pub. Me and my business partner there having a beer just with this one bloke. And he was that worried about Mad Monday people wrecking his pub that he didn't want to let anyone in. And immediately we thought, this isn't a good business model for a pub. They should be embracing. So be all and end all, we ended up being successful, bought this pub, and it had an immaculate fit out in it. Nearly $3 million had been spent, and it had ended up going belly up. And the guy who I'd met was the freehold owner, and he wasn't a publican, was finding it tough to run and was doing $8,000 a week. Brutal. Took over the venue, 10 staff, no hospitality experience, not easy. And what made it even more challenging was in Geelong, and it's a small place, everyone knows everyone, that fit out that had all that money spent on it didn't get paid for. And the previous operators who'd gone belly up, the tenants, had huge debts to all sorts of people all across town. So that's a real challenge to start in a community like that. So that was the start of the crazy, and we had to win the community over. And it was incredible learnings over that year because we were no good at hospo. We were no good at food. Of our 10 staff, we didn't have a head chef. We had a third-year apprentice, which looking back now, I don't think was even the right thing to legally do, having that guy running our kitchen. But we launched steak nights. We tried innovative promotions and ideas to try and grow the business.
What did you do in there to try to learn quickly about hospitality?
We worked really long hours. So when you're in a business that's losing money, you've got no choice. So you're in there 7 days a week, open to close. It's a grind. We really communicated and shared the challenges. We had a young team and they all got it and we all bought in together we're committed to try and get that thing right and make it work. So that first year was just blood, sweat, tears. We had challenges. Who could open the door first for customers? Because we were so excited to see customers. And when they left too, open the door and say thank you. The basics of hospitality, being hospitable to people, looking after people, that was the greatest lesson and learning about this business, because our food and drinks were nowhere like the standard that they are today. And in fact, we had a great regular, John, who still goes to the pub, and his wife every Tuesday night. And I would ask him, John, how'd we go this Tuesday with the steak? And unfortunately, often the answer was, oh, James, it could have been better. Not great. And I'd say, oh, look, it's on me then, John. He said, mate, you need the dough. I'll pay for it. I'll see you next Tuesday. And that was purely off the back of building rapport and relationships with the community and people. So I'm eternally grateful to Geelong, to the community, to the originals and the staff that helped us build and dug in when we were really doing it tough. And we've still got some of the original staff still work in the business now today, where we've grown to over 50 locations and more than 2,000 staff. But those people are the fabric of and the DNA of our business, which is drop everything for the customer, that customer first culture and people first. That year, we built that business from $8,000 right up to be a really busy and popular venue. And Geelong eventually then won a grand final. And I remember just being mayhem. The streets were packed. Again, we were then understaffed by how busy we became over time. Again, a little crazy story on that. Some of those bigger days, I called in mates and my brother and one of my best mates to come and help. And I said, mate, he said, do you want me to get behind the jump? And how hard can it be to pour beers? And I thought, oh, RSA, few issues here. Anyway, I thought, what could go wrong? I came back about 5 minutes later and horrified. I said, mate, what happened? And these girls had come over pretty quickly and ordered cocktails. He didn't know what he's doing. So he said, girls, you look like you know what you're talking about. And he's handed them the bottles of spirits and away they're going. We got a full house, venue license for nearly 800 people. It was crazy times.
Oh, goodness. I know a lot of listeners will resonate with that story, will resonate in a number of ways there as well. Thank you for sharing your crazy story. And I guess it's more of a story around how the business has evolved too. And you've certainly come a long way in that time. You mentioned 2009 and we're a number of years after that. Some of the figures you brought out there were your business. You've got more than 50 venues as well. Did you recently open the 50th venue at the time of recording?
Yeah, we opened it last month.
Yeah, I thought so. And how have things changed since then? You must have a number of systems and processes in place. What are some key things that have really changed in that time, going from opening venue 1 to opening venue 50?
Well, yeah, of course, compliance obviously is improved, thankfully. But over the journey, and I think those formative years were really important in establishing what we like to refer to as one best way and just consistently pushing ourselves to find what is the best process or system, procedure to do this really well, efficiently, time after time. And is it right for our customer and our guest? Can we execute it? And can we make money out of it? We always ask those 3 questions when we're assessing a new concept, a new idea, whatnot. Trying to come up with clear systems that can be repeated has really been crucial. I think people management, when you're scaling a business, it's all about people, but then people do thrive, we found, by providing them clear goals, objectives, a vision, so they really know the game's no fun if you can't see how many pins you've knocked down. We like to really show people what the objectives are when they're working for us. So we do goal setting and then we manage teams in families of 7 and make sure we're doing regular reviews, providing feedback on results and continually trying to improve.
I've got a couple of questions to that. The first, why specifically teams of 7?
I've had teams bigger and smaller. I think some people might have picked 6, some 8, or whatever number's right for them. 7, we found a good number, a lucky number. Today still I have 7 direct reports and try to flow through under them. I think if you get too many more, it's hard to really have an in-depth understanding of them and their character and what drives and motivates them, which is really important, I think, when you're managing people. And then also to have some knowledge of their workflow and what's going on, and be able to take the time to check in with them throughout the month and see how you're progressing with that particular area. People aren't superstars at everything, so it's really important, I think, that you apply some form of situational leadership to people when you set goals, because there'll be some tasks that you give them that they're better than you at. And that's what you want ultimately. That's awesome. but there's often things that they mightn't be, and you need to agree with them to partner on that goal, objective or task so that you help them achieve it. And ultimately, my job as a leader and my team who lead people, our job is to all help facilitate our team to be successful in executing their goals, objectives and tasks.
It's interesting. Thanks for sharing your answer on that as well. But either side of that 7 seems to be quite an important group dynamic that evolves. I'm studying my MBA at the moment, and there's definitely some management theory around 7. So interesting hearing that from you.
There is a good book and a few things about some American Indian tribes that have worked in families of 7 and tribes of 7. And somebody who's been influential on Jeff Harris was one of the Flight Centre guys, and his son Brad's a partner in the business and been really tight mates since we were kids. And I think Screw Turner, who runs Flight Centre, talks about that model too. So it's been, again, something that's been tested. I think other people have maybe picked other numbers in teams and so forth. Some people go up to 10s, some 5s. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to try, when you're trying to scale a system, to try to pick something, right or wrong, and stick to that structure.
Thanks for sharing that as well. I mentioned I had 2 questions that sort of came about from your previous answer. The second one is combining the 2 things that you brought up first, and the first was around those 3 questions that you ask. The second was that people were incredibly important. My question is, how do you foster a culture within the business to allow people the flexibility to execute while also asking those 3 questions? How do you create that environment for them to do that and also encourage them to ask those sorts of questions from the top down?
Yeah, I think you need to encourage people to take risks all the time and, again, make decisions. And that comes from rewarding and encouraging that. And certainly you don't want a culture where the red tape and the fear of being wrong stifles creativity and entrepreneurialism. That's something that we try to foster all the time. We say to people, right or wrong, make a decision. We'll never be upset if it was the wrong one, but you gave it your best and you tried. So having a real bias towards action, I think, is really important. And that, again, comes from the leaders, making sure, again, that we are repeating that message. And again, from the top, people seeing us striving towards achieve things and sometimes being wrong and saying that's okay. If we fail, we'll fail fast and get on with it and try something new.
Do you feel that that's sort of that tech mentality of fail fast, move fast and break things, which I think was Facebook's original motto or internal slogan? Do you feel like that's permeated the rest of the business world in that period of time since kind of the early 2000s and that at the time that you've built the business?
You know, I think certainly Facebook have been well known for it, but I think Richard Branson was as good as any at it as well. I think he often talked in the Virgin days about screw it, let's do it. I think he was one who had a book similarly around that slogan, but looking sensibly at what you're going to do and I think mitigating the risk. And you want to be cautious and calculated, looking at what are all the things that could go wrong here and how do I avoid looking like an absolute idiot in this decision. I often ask that question and then it makes me think about the worst case downsides. And if I can live with them, mitigate them and know that it's not game over if those things eventuate, and then the upside outweighs the down and you crack on.
A question I normally ask at the very beginning of the episode after a crazy story, and we've moved on to a whole bunch of other things afterwards that I've certainly enjoyed, but just want to, I guess, flag it as a point to ask the question. I'd like to know a bit more around why you do what you do, what it is that really inspires you and drew you to the business of hospitality. You said you enjoyed sports bars in the US, but what is it that really fundamentally drives you in this business?
I think it changes over time for me, or it has personally. As you suggest, when I got into the business, I was young. I was 24 years old. I was living in the US and fell in love with beer, buffalo wings and sport. Pretty normal for a young bloke. It wasn't hard. So I enjoyed the product and I really saw an opportunity, and that's what spurred that direction for me. But why am I still in it and loving it and getting up every day 13, 14 years later? And I think there's a number of things. One, with hospitality, the people is a huge piece. And it sounds cliche. The journey that we've had over that 13, 14 years, I've forged some incredible relationships and had fantastic moments with people that I care deeply about that work within our business and are connected to our business from suppliers and other stakeholders. I love that this type of business is so interactive with people and we get to have amazing time every day coming to work, interacting together. And again, we provide a space and an experience that gives others the opportunity. Our job is to bring mates together over a love of beer and sport. It's a privilege to do that and a lot of fun doing that. That's one incredible part that I love and get genuine fulfillment and joy from, spending time having fun with the people. The other part is the growth. And again, we've been able to create a model that's scaled and continues to grow. And we've delivered sort of 30% compound annual growth for over a decade. That really excites me, getting up in the morning. And I always say, if you're not growing, you're going. And this industry and business gives me an opportunity to continue day, week, month, year after year, deliver growth. And it's growth in all sorts of areas, from we're helping emerging suburbs as Australia's population grow, create social outlets from building product there. We're seeing careers grow and people within our business develop and scale and get better day by day. And then obviously from a financial view, achieving growth results year on year is incredibly rewarding too. So that growth inspires me and fuels me to keep going.
How do you create a culture internally that you possess with the broader business and give that to others to also have that sort of inspiration within themselves?
Coming up with a big, hairy, scary vision and goal, that's exciting. And putting out on a board, this is what we're going to do in 10 years and this is how we're going to do it. And this is what's in it for everyone here. This is what we're going to achieve together. It's something really special. That's how you inspire. And I've seen people inspired and others have inspired me to buy into a culture of growth mindset. And then looking back and celebrating the milestones over the journey and even the small wins, because there's no doubt I find it's easy in a year's period to overestimate what you're going to achieve and perhaps undershoot. But over a decade, you often overshoot. And usually people are making their 10-year goals too small. The power of compounding is huge, and trying to share that big vision, show people the way forward over a multi-year journey, and generally be positive. If you're leading a business that's growing, you have to be ultimately an optimist and constantly reassuring the team that the future is bright.
How do you realign with that within yourself? Because sometimes it's hard to maintain that optimism. How do you remind that for you? If things are getting tough and constantly putting out fires, every business operator knows that's a reality. Things just appear. How do you realign internally and then execute that externally to bring people behind that same vision again?
I think it gets easier with experience. I think early days, sometimes you're just in the thick of it. I've been in the thick, in the fog, where you thought, how am I ever going to get out? I've just got to keep punching day by day. So it's 7 days a week, just the grind. And eventually, when you can get those wins and break through, I think it builds incredible confidence in what you've achieved and how you can do that. So yeah, I think now if I'm going through something, I've got real confidence in the process. It's a bit like footy clubs say, isn't it? When you're down and out a bit, stick and believe in your process, and eventually you'll get the outcome and the result if you're using a successful formula. So when you've been through what we've been through in the past, you know you've developed the resilience, you can have confidence in the process and the system. There'll be ebbs and flows, ups and downs, day, week, monthly, but over years, you'll 100% come good.
James, I'd like to ask you what you're learning about or exploring at the moment. This question is deliberately broad for you to take in any way that you'd like.
Continuing to push myself to grow and develop at a strategic level. I think at the scale of business is now, I spend a lot more time assessing our corporate strategy and the right plays we're doing there. I think I'd like to learn about what others have done, and usually there are great case studies and people willing to help you to share how they've been successful in different ways. Listening to podcasts, I think, is a great way, like yours, and others to, again, it's not rocket science. There are people that have walked before us, trying to learn from them, and particularly in that strategic space, which is important to set the company up in the right direction over multi-years and then share that right the way through the team so it can be executed well.
Any particular case studies or people or brands that you look to?
Yeah, I just recently, with a business organisation, we brought out a professor from Harvard and we did a case study on Domino's. And that was fascinating to see their growth from sort of 2009, similar period to when I started the business. And they weren't overly successful, certainly weren't the number one pizza maker, through to over the decade that followed, and the rapid growth in their share price and really their focus around making sure that they did three key things. They take orders for pizza, they make pizza, they deliver it. And they realised that the people only needed to really focus on that central piece, the making of a great product. And the ordering and the delivery, that was where technology was going to come into play. And they in-housed their technology and spent a lot developing what became an absolute industry best and leader in both ordering and delivery of their products. Gave them huge competitive advantage. And I think in most strategic success stories you read, trying to pick a few things that you can be really good at and focusing on that is really important. When I relay that into our own business, we've gone and had quite a focus around technology as well. And we in-house our development of software from our web design to our app. We were early innovator of apps in pubs. We've got 820,000 loyalty members that use our apps across our brands. So that's been a big focus for us and something we feel we've done reasonably well at as well.
Where then do you see things innovating in the future? Where are you looking to change things or to evolve the industry? Because you have quite an influence, particularly in the sporting world and in pubs. How are you looking to change things?
COVID obviously got everybody looking at digital ordering. That's a wave that's come in and I think is here to stay. There's a place for that we've seen in our venues. We're probably back to between 30 and 40% of people ordering digitally, but I see that still as an area that's in somewhat infancy because the personalisation, customisation that technology will be able to deliver to enhance an experience, and ultimately perhaps this tech was forced upon us through COVID a little early before it was right at the level where hospitality needs, wants and expects, because we're coming for connection and a great seamless experience. But I do believe that over years that technology is going to be a value enhancer and create incredible guest experience once it's been given the due time and investment to be efficient, personalised, customised.
What do you think the future of that hospitality experience really looks like then? That can be as far in the future as you would like to imagine. What does that look like?
Look, our industry probably doesn't change as much as others have, but certainly I believe there'll be human facing still in our business and most of the industry for the foreseeable future. But as mentioned, I think it can be augmented with smart tech and AI to help enable service to know who is the guest that's coming, arriving, or even help them arrive in a more seamless manner, check in themselves, perhaps even be able to be seated themselves. I think they're all very realistic possibilities. And then again, things like personalised menus for when we've got a guest that we know is a repeat customer or so forth, to be able to serve up something that looks different to James than looks different to John and Bill, all at the same table, all ordering together. I think that's an exciting possibility for us in the not too distant future.
In building those sorts of ideas and I guess establishing the path that you are going to go on, it's very much a creative process as much as it's synthesizing a whole bunch of other ideas. How do you go from, this is quite potentially a large question, but how do you play with those ideas first and then entertain them and then execute them?
Well, I think it wouldn't be something I do solo. I've got a really, really strong team that are focused. As mentioned, we in-house our tech and we involve and socialise any sort of big directional ideas of what we're going to develop and build with all areas of the business, from operations, which are super important, marketing, but finance, IT, everybody, procurement has a say and looks at what we're doing. So I think we socialise those sort of ideas. We then need to get really focused and prioritise which are the most important and have the best, most realistic return over the X period, because you can't do all things and everything too quickly, and then get on and build stage one, phase two.
It's really interesting to hear your answer there because it reminded me of something you said earlier in the interview. And I'd like to just connect that up a little bit more. We were talking a bit about vision. For some people, the vision is really easy. For some people, the executing is really easy. How do you bridge that gap and actually connect the long-term vision with the execution and make sure that it's working smoothly to achieve the vision that you're hoping for?
Yeah, I think it's trying to, again, have your vision, big picture, and then a mission. And a mission for us gets a little bit more tangible with some clearer objectives and perhaps even starting to get a little bit more KPI, breaking those down into tasks. And we then look overall and annually, we break down some key objectives from department that are all linked to our clear mission, vision, strategy, and then try to have the teams go and execute on those. And you don't just leave that. You need to do checkbacks regularly and see how we're progressing. And there must be really clear milestones and KPIs in place to make sure that everybody's moving in the right direction. TGI Fridays has been around since 1965. They've seen and been absolute leaders in the industry in so many ways, from inventing the Long Island iced tea, the world's first happy hour in New York, first bar anyone lined up to do. They've also done some incredibly innovative things in the systems and management space. Everything from recognition of people, and they were the first to create pins for recognition in companies, something now Toyota use and many big companies around the world use for recognising, acknowledging staff. But one thing they've also got is something called the Fridays theories, and bartenders all around the world and people who've come through Fridays will have heard of the theories. And they're common sense, and they make that they're stuff that people who've been around hospo for a long time have hopefully picked up and learned and maybe just refer to in a different way. But one's called the elephant pull theory, and that is if you want to move an elephant, you need everybody pulling in the same direction. You're not going to move it with 5 people pulling it every different way. So that's something we refer to in meetings and in certain tasks where we know this is a team exercise and none of us are going to win if we're not pulling in the same direction.
I'd like to ask you the biggest challenge that you're experiencing right now. What I'm really looking for in this is friction that you're experiencing. Where is it that you're focusing attention, that something is challenging that you're working through?
I think a huge piece that we've all experienced over the last few years has been the staffing shortages. We feel like now we're back to a really healthy number of staff again, but having to do a lot in training, development. I think wanting to keep staff long term, and particularly in an industry where staff have been more transient, people coming through, working while they're studying university or doing other things for a period. We're a younger person, a lot of younger people in the hospitality industry that come in, and it's often a first job for many people, and then they again transition to other industries. So I think that's something that certainly has been a huge challenge the past few years, and we're really focused, and I'm personally wanting to find ways to make sure that we're creating long, rewarding careers that make it attractive for people to be and work with us, particularly in an age now where hospitality can't offer work from home the same way. We're physically delivering experiences to people day in, day out, in what's often considered obviously unsociable hours, if it's Friday, Saturday, Sundays. So that's definitely a challenge. And I think for management more so as well, because when you've got senior people that get to a stage of life where maybe they're having family and so forth, for them to have the passion and love for the industry to pursue and not say, you know what, I prefer to go and take a 9 to 5 and something with some work for home. They've got to really love what they're doing. It's got to be more than money. So really making sure that they're thinking and they've got a career that they feel incredibly rewarded and engaged by over a long term. Part of that too is offering some skin in the game. And we've now for a number of years offered a franchise model for the Sporting Globe brand where we look for great leaders, great people persons that can lead a team of people. And obviously in venues where you run a reasonable sized team of 50 plus staff, and also can be strong face and leader in the community as their own venue. And I think people love having a local identity that owns and runs their operation. That's been something we've done in Sporting Globe for coming on a decade in the franchise space. And really excitingly, just this year, we got the rights for the first time ever in Fridays history to sub-franchise TGI Fridays. I own the master license for Australia and New Zealand, and usually the owner of the master license must operate all of the venues as corporate stores, and we've got 20 Fridays under that structure, corporate owned. But we're just now releasing that opportunity for people to come in and buy their own TGI Fridays. And again, people persons that work with the system. And I really believe in that model because it gives the skin in the game and the financial reward and the sense of ownership and control of their own destiny for the individual, for that franchise partner to come in and own that business. And that has great competitive advantage because I think a local owner operator are usually exceptionally good at curating a great team and fostering support from the community and the customer base around them. That's competitive advantage. When you then pair that with our strength of corporate being buy power, technology, systems, processes, finance, support and acumen around that, and reporting, marketing and digital marketing changes so much year to year. So you really need smart specialists focused on that. I think it's incredibly challenging being a local owner operator without that back-end support if you're trying to do all of those things yourself. So this model I feel is incredibly good partnership model that also helps solve for the challenge that I'm talking to, which is, how do we keep people and great people in our industry for careers long term?
Congratulations on that as well. For anyone who's listening and interested in the sub-franchise model of James's business, please reach out. I'm sure that's something you're looking at as well.
Yeah, there's information on our websites for all the brands and we love meeting new people and explaining about the opportunity.
Amazing. A question I have in that stems from something else I was listening to recently, which is it was a Y Combinator lecture, but something that you brought up there around having these great people within your business, pairing the two, and no one needs to listen to the lecture I'm referring to understand the question. The question is, how do you identify those people within your business to then invest resources in to do greater things?
I think the old adage of hire for attitude, train for skill, we definitely look at people and their character to identify first, what are they like? Are they ambitious and self-starters and have a bit of a competitive nature, want to succeed and win? Are they likeable and amicable with other people? You need to play well with others in this industry. You need to be able to foster support of the stakeholders around you. And I love Danny Myers, who's obviously a hospitality icon, and I love his philosophy around how much easier it is to win when everybody around you wants you to win. So I think you need people that have a little bit of natural ability at people skills and getting people on side. We look for that competitive attitude and personable people. And then I think people that show some commitment and, as mentioned, resilience and so forth. And those sort of traits we found of people that have been very successful in our business over a long period.
How do you establish systems to identify those sorts of staff within the business? I imagine you rely a lot on management to identify that, but there must be some ways that you can make them alert to those things.
Yeah, we do. When we do, we run a monthly review system. And as part of that, it's not just a review against goals, it's a review against values and behaviours. And we ask people to share every month a different activity, action, something that they've done that is aligned to one of those core values or behaviours. So we're tracking and we keep record of the good things and behaviours that people do. And then we do a more in-depth 360 review too, and look at development of people as well and try to align with where they're at, what the next stage might be, next step might be. And again, if their results and the outcomes of those reviews are screaming that this person's particularly apt at something and should be progressed in a way, then I'd like to think the management team are able to capture that and push them along.
Very good. You mentioned Danny Meyer before. When I read Setting the Table, I thought that was an amazing book. It's one of the resources that I certainly have in my own bank. Are there any resources that you refer to regularly about hospitality, whether it's, and you alluded to it before, but other things like podcasts, books, websites, all sorts of things, people even? Are there any places you look for regular hospitality business resources?
Yeah, I think all of those mediums, as you say, looking at different things like that. The other thing, in addition to the ones you've mentioned, I think is reaching out to people and going and ask to have a coffee. And I think I've found people be incredibly generous with their time. Recently, I flew up to Sydney for a certain person that runs a large investment bank up there, and I just knew he was a smart guy, and I wanted to get his take on a particular item and thought that I had, and he was incredibly generous, and we spent an hour and a half having coffee and him giving me his honest views and opinions and sharing some of life experience. I think I find that I look for people that are really good in certain fields and see if I can find a connection and reach out.
In running your business, there are all sorts of people giving you different opinions and ideas. How do you steer through all of that? There's so much. And it may come back to looking at that vision, but I'd love to hear your take on it.
Well, I think trying to stay somewhat focused to your beacon of light, your vision and where you're heading is really important. But again, I look to people that have actually achieved and been there and done it. And I find it remarkable how consistent some of the advice is from those who've walked the walk. Again, I think it's not like I'm going to see lots of different people that are giving me contrary views on different things. I generally find a common thread that then resonates and is able to give me real conviction in a certain direction that we're headed and go from there. The only other thing I'd say on that, when you reach out to people, I think they're usually generous. Go with some questions and thoughts in mind and try and stay focused, not to tell them a million issues or challenges or thoughts, with a few specific focuses, and then make sure you send a bottle of wine at the end.
How is just sending the bottle of wine at the end the value add for them, or is there something else that you give them in the process?
No doubt. I'm sure they couldn't care less. The bottle of wine is just the token thank you. But I think most people along the journey, we've all been helped by others. And most people, I think, get a sense of satisfaction from chatting and helping up and comers and sharing a little bit of what they maybe have experienced. Yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing and something I think our industry are very good at and pretty open and supportive of one another.
Amazing. I've only got 2 more questions for you on the program today. The first of the final 2 is, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I did have a propensity for finance. I liked corporate finance and enjoyed that type of work. Having said that, I think the industry we're in now has a great people piece. I'm not sure whether I would have stuck it out, but that's probably the most likely area based on the way my mind works.
Being corporate finance, in a way, I'm sure there are a lot of common threads between the two.
It's one of the beautiful things about pubs. No day is the same. There's so many areas that we touch, plenty of finance areas, property, supply chain, obviously consumer and consumer marketing, development. It really is an industry that's so far-fetching in the expertise you need to have to be successful at it.
Thank you, James. There's one last question that I have for you for the program today, and that's, who would you like to hear on the show?
Danny Myers, if you get him, that'd be handy.
I'm trying.
Oh, yeah.
Union Square Hospitality
Number one.
Group.
He'd be number one.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Danny. I'd love to have Danny Meyer on the program. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me today, James. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thanks for having me.
This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.